Hi everyone, I'm Preeti Ars from the Indo-American Arts Council located here in New York City. We are dedicated to promoting the arts and artists of Indian heritage, showcasing the performing, visual, and literary arts. The 2021 Literary Festival runs from December 4th through December 12th this year. And we invite you to join in our great book selection and be part of the conversations that will endure. Today, it is my special honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Guruprasad Kaginele as part of the IAAC 2021 Literary Festival. A medical doctor by profession, Dr. Kaginele has been a prominent voice in contemporary Kannada literature. He has published 4 short story collections, 4 novels, and 2 essay collections. His works have received several awards. Many of his short stories have appeared in anthologies published by Karnataka Sahitya Academy. He has also been the primary editor for 2 books published by the US-based Kannada Sahitya Ranga. Some of his short stories have been published into, Telugu, Konkani Malayalam, and English. His novel Hijab garnered both popular and critical acclaim, and the novel was judged the best novel for the year 2018 by the Karnataka Sahitya Academy. In 2020, the English version of the novel was published by Simon & Schuster, India. Hijab was shortlisted for the Atta Galata Bangalore Literature Festival Book Awards and finalist for the Best Translated Works from India in 2021. Doctor lives in Rochester, Minnesota with his family, and he works as an emergency physician at the Olmsted Medical Center in Rochester, Minnesota. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
I'm equally happy and honored to invite our moderator, Professor S.N. Sridhar. Professor Sridhar is a SUNY Distinguished Service Professor, Professor of Linguistics and India Studies, and founding director of the Mattu Center for India Studies at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Professor Sridhar is an expert on Kannada language, Indian languages in general, on sociolinguistics and multilingualism in India, on Indian English and world Englishes, as well as on second language acquisition and use. He is the author of 3 books, including A Grammar of Modern Kannada, and co-editor of 2 reference volumes, Ananya, A Portrait of India, and Language in South Asia, and others. He founded the India Society of Stony Brook in 1989, and he founded and served as the first chair of Stony Brook's Department of Asian and Asian American Studies. He also founded the Center for India Studies in 1997. The center is a respected academic resource and a proud community asset, teaching some 30 courses on India every year. It has exposed over 20,000 students to India studies. In recognition of his accomplishments, the university has conferred on him the highest rank for their faculty, that of Distinguished Professor. He has also been designated Senior Scholar in Humanities. Professor Sridhar has worked extensively with scholars in universities in India. He co-directed a Winter Institute in Kannada Linguistics at Kannada University, Hampi, and was the Gyan Professor at Mangalore University. He delivered the keynote address of the Linguistic Society of India and has delivered webinars at many Indian universities. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel. Welcome.
Thank you.
God, thank you. I guess I will start by, first of all, thanking Preeti Ars for that very generous introduction. It's like a tail wagging the dog. My introduction was too long, but very kind of you. Thank you. And I'm also delighted to be part of the Indo-American Arts Council Literary Festival. And it is a very distinguished event that takes place every year. And it has taken place for more than 20 years. And it has featured such stalwarts as Salman Rushdie and others. And so we are delighted to have with us today a wonderful writer whom I admired enormously when I first read his when I came across his writings in Kannada, which is also my language. And so, welcome, Dr. Guruprasad Kaginele. It's really a great pleasure for me to be able to speak with you today. So what we will do is, if that is okay, we will have an informal chat about a wide range of topics, making the book in focus as an excuse. So this is the book. It is called Hijab. It has been published by Simon & Schuster, India, and it's widely available. And it has also won the Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award from Bangalore. And it has just been reviewed very nicely and in great detail by the probably the premier literary criticism periodical that comes out of India for the book review. And it's a very complimentary review, but that is not surprising. So congratulations, Dr. Kaginele.
Thank you.
Okay, so where do we start? I have so many things to talk with you about. But, probably I thought it would be interesting to first ask you to say something about yourself and the book. So let us say it's very interesting that you have a background which is not the typical background of novelists. So you are an active, working physician, an emergency room physician. And so that probably makes you already a very interesting person, because you must be coming across all kinds of interesting situations. And so please start by giving us a little background about yourself. When did you come to this country? Where did you study? And how did you get interested in literature and writing, in addition to your professional specialization?
Thanks, Dr. Sridhar, Professor Sridhar, and thank you, Preeti, right? Right, Preeti Aras, yeah, for that introduction. Well, I, like any other, I was raised in the southern part of Karnataka, in a small town called Nagamangala in Mandya district. I'm a native of Shimoga, but I grew up in Mysore for the first 12 years. And then after that, most of my high school education, it happened in Nagamangala, which is a small town. And then I did my medical school in Bellary and my post-graduation also in Bellary. Came to this country in 1995 and did my internal medicine and pulmonary critical care residency and started working as an ER physician. Most of my time I have spent in Midwest, Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan since I came in. And I worked in as an emergency physician all through. This is my 22nd year in emergency medicine. The interest in literature was there, but I had never ventured writing. It was one of those things that I used to read quite a bit when I was younger. I used to make like a special trip to Shimoga, where my grandma used to give like 10 paisa for circulating libraries. This was in the 70s. My grandma was a very orthodox woman, and she needed, and I don't know if you know the customs of, they need this sacred water. You need to take a shower and get this water for her, before anything. And after that, she used to give, like, every time you do it, she used to give like 10 paisa. And we used to go, cousins. That was the big thing when we went to Shimoga. We used to go to circulating libraries and get books that was like for 24 hours, it was 10 paisa. We used to rent that book, but we were like about 5 cousins. All of us want to read and finish it. So we were like, how the kids nowadays have like some show going on their iPhone and 5 people surrounding, they're like speaking, reading over their, like reaching over their shoulder to see that. We used to literally read 200-page book in 6 hours and return it because that's the only thing that we had. And we used to read, and most of it was popular literature. I was like 10 or 12. And then when I went to college, medical school, the availability, I was reading mostly Kannada books at that time because my first language was Kannada. And because the books were in abundance at that time, and there was no other way of entertaining us. There were no TV, no phones, nothing like that. And then when I moved to Bellary, the availability of books, because it's a medical school, the time the time is very short. Your free time, you don't have much free time, and then you go and borrow from friends, and more than what I chose, I was reading what was available. That was good because when you buy a book, you don't go and buy some pulp fiction. People used to go and buy what was considered as classic. So I got introduced to that by force, to be honest. I was reading it because what was that available. So during that time, I did read quite a lot of Kannada classics like Shivaram Karanth, Kuvempu, and U.R. Anantamurthy, so far and so on. And in late after all, after like in 1995 when I was leaving for United States, I got introduced to one of my still best friends, Vasudendra. He is a very prominent author in Kannada. He had not even published a single book, and he happens to be my brother's classmate. He went to the same engineering school in Surathkal. So he had written some manuscripts, stories, and he was just like, giving it to whoever could read. And I read some of those stories, and I thought, like, what? These are some of the stories that I could write too. I have some of these stories, but similar to it, and you don't have to be a scholar to be a writer. It's thought like that was the impression that I had. You need to read like thousands of books, and you can't write something which is very, which you yourself consider as like, it may not be in the league of Anantamurthy's writing or A.K. Ramanujan's writing or something like that. I had that own thing. Then I thought, like, what? Maybe I can write this. And then when I wrote and showed it to friends, it was very well appreciated, my very first story, and it was published. It took a long time to publish, but it did. And then one thing led to another, and I kept writing short stories. And the style of writing, I was told from day one that you can't tell anything small. Even the short stories were like about 8,000 words long. So they were like telling that you probably should write a novel from the get-go. And I just started thinking about it, and I wrote my first novel, which is titled Biliya Chadara, which is the white sheet. It is like again that happens in America. Most of my stories and novels have been set in America around it, and I believe in I have to tell the story of what goes around me rather than what has happened to me in childhood. That's something that I have always done. And coming to Hijab, it happened so that after living in America for 20, almost like a 17 to 18 years, this subject was kind of haunting me, but for a long time. It took like about 7 years for me to conceptualize and bring it into on the words, bring it into a novel form. And first of all, I write in Kannada. That's another thing. I was just thinking.
If I may interrupt, a very brief outline of what the novel is about, so that people know what you're talking about.
Sure.
Because many of our readers may not have read it, and I'm hoping that this will encourage them to go and get the book and read it, because I myself find it so interesting, but I want to make sure everybody is involved.
Oh, you want me to tell the?
Yeah, something about
Sure.
the book.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to. Okay, so when the book, the storyline, it's very hard for me to tell the storyline in a few lines, but I'll try. This is like a story of immigration. I consider immigration as a spectrum. When we come to America, the dream, American dream, I'll straight out say there's no better way of telling. When we came to America and to assimilate into American culture, or when we immigrate to America and be a part of American, you always think about assimilating into or becoming a white American. That's something that we always, whoever come from outside, at least people like India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, those are like people who like us who come in after some education, and the American dream is, not to go and work in Walmart or JCPenney for like $10 an hour or $15. We always want to become like, at least that's the cream of the society or whatever it is. I'm not telling, but this is something.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, this is something that is kind of you see immigrants coming like us from who are like educated and we have a job, and then I was seeing the other group of immigrants who are coming as refugees, or some of them were undocumented workers, and lots of these people when they come in, and I am like, where am I in this spectrum? That always bothered me because I'm a physician. When I'm working in the emergency room, I have to prioritize who is more sick and who is, who am I supposed to see? If like five people come into the emergency room at the same time, who am I going to pick? The first one, is it the most sick person or most demanding person? Somebody is like, somebody might be coming in with a knife in his belly, and he's too afraid to say that there is a knife in his belly. He's sitting in the triage bleeding out because he's involved in a gang war or something like that, and there is like a mom yelling because the child has some bead stuck in the nose and you want to take it out right now, otherwise the child is going to die. So who am I going to? So as an emergency physician, how am I triaging this? Is this coming in my way of treating my patients? Is the color, class, all these things. So when I was thinking about it, I thought like, I should bring all of these things in one umbrella. And how can I do this with my experience? And this was something that I thought like, this was a good setting where I could create this. I tried something like that, and I was very nervous about writing this in Kannada because sometimes, when people don't know anything that's happening in America, how do Kannada readers respond to this? So I had my own doubt, but I just wrote it. I thought like, I should write whatever that I think is important, and I think is very like, I think that I cannot write anything else other than I write this first. So that's how I started writing it. The plot is like three doctors in a small town, Minnesota, trying to work in a small hospital to get their green cards, because that's, if you work in a smaller hospital, you get the green card sooner. And then this is like this town is like a very Midwestern white town where they see a flux of immigrants from a fictional country called Sangala, which is in Africa, who happen to be blacks and Muslims. And to keep the hospital going, you need doctors like Guru, Radhika, and Razak or Shrikanta, who will work there where no American wants to work there, because this is something that they could get their green card sooner. So they kind of encounter this cultural clash. They're stuck in between the management and then, management who are trying to do the best thing to the hospital, or they think what is best for the hospital by keeping the community happy. And these doctors are stuck doing the right thing to all the patients. And then they have this community from Africa, Sangali community, who have their own beliefs, and they just don't want to agree to anything that is against their beliefs. And when that happens, the whole thing unravels. There's a lot of clash of community, clash of culture, clash of class. All these things happen, and wanted to. Obviously, it is a fiction, so you want drama, so you just need to get all those things in the same book. And I tried this, and then Kannada literary enthusiast is very kind enough to read the book, and I got a very good response. And at the same time, one of the publishers did get in touch with me to get it translated. And Pavan was, is such a wonderful translator. I think that he brought the essence of the book in English also. It was very well received in English too. I think I'll start.
We'll come to that in a minute. Anyway, I'm glad that I asked you to talk about the book rather than me talking about it, because you brought in the essence of it in a nutshell. So there are so many things that you talked about that we can expand upon in our discussion now. So first of all, I want to mention that the small town background that you talked about, being born in Shimoga, being brought up in Nagamangala, and things like that, and also studying in Bellary and in places like that, getting your first reading experience through a circulating library. All of that, it's so typical and so authentic. And in fact, that's exactly what happened to me. I was born in Shimoga, and my first extensive reading was through this circulating library. My brother bought me a subscription, and then I started reading, especially pulp fiction, Pattedari detective novels in Kannada. And that grew my reading interest. And then we went on to the classics. So this is one of the things that really interests me about your work, as opposed to many other things that we see. That is, your ability to bring in a small town experience, authentic experience that is grounded in the culture and society of Karnataka, and as an extension that is representative of India as a whole. And so these are things that are not always represented in the mainstream literature, Indian literature that is written in English, for example. And so it's very interesting that this reading your books gives people a very authentic idea of what it is like to grow up in India and to live in India and so on. And at the same time, as you mentioned, you write not about your memories of growing up in the past, but rather about the conflicts and tensions and challenges of working here in America as a professional. And so that is also very interesting. And you bring in as part of this such wonderful things as, for example, as you mentioned, the cultural conflict between, let us say, the Muslim minorities who have just come into a predominantly white small town in Midwestern America. I mean, how much more authentic can this get, right? And as part of that, you did not mention the specifics, but we will be talking about this. So the whole novel is centered around the issue of, for example, performing the cesarean section. And now the cesarean section, as we all know, is done so routinely, and in fact, too routinely, according to some people in America, that you don't even give a second thought to that. But when two cultures collide, as it were, this leads to some very interesting and very important issues, including issues of medical ethics, professional responsibility, political correctness, and all of those things that you already alluded to in terms of your triaging the patients in the emergency room, for example. Do you respond to the people who are loudest or the person who has the most serious injury, and so on and so forth? So I'm very glad that you are bringing out these interesting issues. And as you said, you yourself raised this question. These are issues that are of central concern to America, to an American life. And as we see in our media and so on, there is so much discussion about political correctness and mainstream versus others, etc. But you have succeeded in making something like this, that is the issue of the cultural conflict in a small town between this imaginary community of Sangala and the mainstream communities and so on. You have succeeded in making this real in a language like Kannada, whose culture is different, whose concerns are different, and so on and so forth. And so you do that by two things. One is, of course, your sensitivity and sensibility, your refined and beautiful, very, very sharpened sensitivity to the sound and your ability to observe and so on and so forth of Americans here. And at the same time, you bring in the characters, the three characters that you talk about, Guru, who happens to have the same name as you. And so I will come to that question as to the relationship between the protagonist of the novel and your own experience. But for the time being, we'll call him the protagonist, Dr. Guru. And there are a few other doctors who also face the same kind of issues that you are talking about. It is in terms of immigration, coming here on J1 and then working in a small town with the hope of getting a green card and so on. Very authentic, real, down-to-earth problems that almost every Indian immigrant into America has faced. So one thing that I think we need that the readers can take from this is that they are getting a very authentic picture of not only of an Indian writer and Indian culture back home, but also American culture here, depicted through your novel. That was wonderful. And so let's continue. You already raised some very interesting questions, including that of translation. Let me just go backpedal a little and talk about the relationship between professional life and your writing. So you have brought the issues and the conflicts and the tensions of your professional life into your writing. And that is not very common in our writings usually. So, for example, there have not been too many doctors who have written about literature in Kannada, for example. There has been a wonderful psychologist, Anupama Niranjana, and others, but not too many. So what has it been like? Bringing in your, so in one sense, it gives you wonderful material, but you also have to be, as you said, a wonderful student of culture in order to bring out its significance, right?
So, I do spend quite a bit of my time in the hospital. So in the emergency room, this is a question that I do get asked, how down pain, and you consider all the possibilities, and then do I dwell too much into the social history of that patient so that that forms a good story for me? I usually don't do that. I mean, that's so when I'm working as a physician, I am a physician. I never mix the two. One. Second thing is, you cannot make up a story. You cannot just create a story just by going and collecting information. I think the information that you get from your patients or whatever that is, that has to stay in your mind. That has to haunt you for a long time. Then that's the part of the thing that I take away from my profession, which is just like some guy, just to give an example, a guy had tried to put the shoulder back without any pain medication. Obviously, it was not possible. It was very painful. Yeah, so I had to give him the medication. So till then, I was just doing my job as a doctor. When I was pushing the medication and putting him to sleep, he just opened his eyes and asked me, "Doctor, are you an Arab? Are you a Muslim?"
Yeah.
Then this whole thing of there was a story right there. This guy had gone to Afghanistan for no fault of his, whether he wanted to go or not, he went there and he had this horrible disease and came back, and he has come to a conclusion that he cannot just trust one whole community. And that is the part that bothers, and there is things that makes a story rather than putting the shoulder back. These are the things that you don't have to think about it. I still think about it. This has happened probably 8-10 years ago. So my profession always does help me get these kind of stories, but I don't really go looking for these kind of stories.
I noticed that just in your description just now of this particular incident, there is not only the issues and questions that that patient raised, but also there is a certain quality of introspection in you, deep introspection of questioning your own motives, questioning the correctness of your decisions, and why you are doing what you are doing, to what extent you've been influenced by this as opposed to that, etc. So that makes it a very endearing thing about this novel, and that makes you identify with the character, because it's not just an outsider's description of a medical doctor doing certain things, but it's as if it's an insider's examination of why you are doing what you are doing and that sort of thing. So in other words, there is a psychological depth and a three-dimensional quality to the characters that you depict, and that comes out very beautifully. So since in the little bit of time that we have, I do want to touch a few other topics, and if you don't mind, very quickly we will do this. One is with regard to the translation, and as they say, the real test of the success of a translation is that the translated work should read as if it is an original work in that language, in the translated language, and it should read authentic rather than as a translated piece. And I think the translation that Pavan Rao has done of this hijab, it really passes that test. And it reads beautifully as an authentic independent work in English, as if it were written in English. And you say that you were very much involved in the translation process. And now, as a linguist, I'm particularly interested in this. So what was it like to be involved in the translation process? And so, for example, were you a nuisance to the translator, or were I'm sure with your sensitivity to English and Kannada, of course, you must have actually contributed and enhanced the quality and the beauty of the translation. And also, there is a related question. Question of it's as though working with the translation is like being able to get a second chance to write the novel. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there was some pause in the last sentence, but I think I got the crux of your question. So, for me, it's both ways. I'm writing a story that happens in America. The world, every character speaks in English. The milieu, the story, all the nurses, the entire novel happens in English, but I can only write it in Kannada. So I bring all the characters into this, my world, my literary world, my story world, into this world where the narrator, the nurses, the patients, the common people, everything happens. So there is a translation that has happened in my mind, I don't call it as translation. I kind of, at some level, a translation happened in my mind from English to Kannada, meaning I don't know if I can use the word translation, but that has somehow it has happened. And then this was the first time Pavan and I had worked on few short stories, and I thought like he was the ideal person to get this thing done. So we kind of made this thing. When I write it, I always think about this. The next novel that I wrote is even more rooted in America. So there is always a question that my friends ask. Who are your intended audience? When you write this totally American fiction in Kannada, lots of things, people may or may not understand, may not get it at all, because there are like too many things. I don't really try to, do footnotes or try to explain anything. I just keep writing, and then this is exactly what I'm trying to convey. And if people have questions, they have other resources to look for it. That's not an arrogance, but that's the quality of fiction that I'm creating, and I just don't want other things to distract the readers. I just don't want to say, for example, there was an argument telling that, if you go to Starbucks, even in Bangalore, and buy 2 lattes or something, and when you there also, if somebody is like giving you is buying you the coffee, you say thank you, which is very appropriate even in Bangalore, even in Karnataka. But there has been a theory that, lots of if you say thank you, it's okay. If you say thanks a lot, or thank you so much, or like I'm extremely thankful to you, then that becomes a little bit too much for the Kannada reader to understand. So I don't really go into those things. I think this is how these people talk. I'm more faithful to the characters. I don't know if I can tell this very, it shouldn't sound like an arrogance. I'm more faithful to the characters. How do these characters behave, whether they're in Bangalore, whether they're in US. So this is one thing. So basically, I cater to, meaning like in my mind. So once we started translating, both Pavan and I, we decided, because there is, he was very much open to this idea of collaborating, meaning like, we will sit together and do it. So when the first draft, when he did it, we kept that, with little bit of modification and trying to, go back to the original and say, okay, this is, we need to change this. Every chapter he used to translate and send it to me. Now with all this Zoom and Google, we used to sit together and go every line, literally read. He used to read and I used to read, like every single line. We have done that probably for at least 3-4 times, every line and every word. And if you think that some of these things are not appropriate, I think one of my best friends, Vivek, keeps telling, this is very, very, very important to keep in mind. Every word has its own memory. For example, you say a word in Kannada like "bellagiruudella halalla." It gives and it evokes a memory. And when you say,
just for our readers, we would say that there's a proverb which translates approximately like everything that looks white is not milk.
Yeah. So when I write like that, when you translate it literally, it doesn't evoke the same memory as "bellagiruudella halalla," or like all that is white is not milk. And now, so we kind of just like went into changing it to all that glitters is not gold, something like that, which is more familiar, which evokes the same kind of memory in a different language.
That's right.
That is something that we kept, there were like other things that we did. There is like something called, he was pretty, Pavan was pretty good with these kind of words. And there is one, I think that I have mentioned this in previous interviews also, one thing called prahasana. Prahasana is like translated as satire, or, like very loosely translated into that. And he used the word burlesque. It's like a Vegas show. Which is
not exactly the same thing, right? Very different.
Yeah, but somehow it kind of you kind of get that impression, okay, what exactly he's trying to say. Even though it is not faithful translation, it's a workable translation. So we kind of just thought like, this should be a work of, this should be should read like an independent work. So what can we do to make the translation better, readable? And there are lots of things that were like models for me. There is a translator in Kannada. He brings Russian, like Tolstoy and O.L. Nagamushi. Yeah, he has translated the War and Peace, and multiple lots of things. But his translation is to cater to contemporary Kannada readers. So he uses some of these words like how Bangalore street guys use, like and some character in Anna Karenina is telling, oh, that weather was so horrible. He uses that in Kannada. I idiot bandhu. This is how he uses. I know that like this might not make sense to English readers, but he uses like as if 18th century.
That's how we talk.
Yeah, that's exactly how we talk, and that's why there is translations are very important to update. The original work stays, but the translations keep updating.
Yeah. I have a question. You talked about Vivek Shanbag and so on. And so this is a general question about the cultural politics of Indian literature. For a long time, Indian literature was dominated by Bengalis. And so there was a lot of Bengali writers, and it was all Bengali critics and so on and so forth. And so often people practically identified Indian literature with Bengali literature And but of late there seems to be some changes, and in particular, Kannada seems to be coming into focus. So with writers like, for example, A.K. Ramanujan and U.R. Anantmurthy and Vivek Shanbag, and all these people have been translated and translated well into English, or they either they wrote in English also, and of course your own book now and so on. So what's going on with Kannada? So there's something very interesting and something very lively that seems to be going on in the Kannada literary scene. And people around the world are not quite aware that Kannada has a very distinguished literary history, and it has a vibrant contemporary literature. And so can you say something about that?
Sure. I think, unfortunately, Kannada literature is known to the world through English. The translations have happened in the past, but not to this extent. And even though most of it has been a group effort, meaning like academies, academies have translated some of the classics. For various reasons, they haven't been the best translations, and we haven't, it really didn't convey the crux of the original to the intended readers. So I think happened with Vivek's novel, Gachar Gochar. That is one of the. It's a very small novel, very fine novel, very. And when it got translated to English, that got a very wide recognition, including American edition and almost like completely like all European languages, and it was just a phenomenal, and it was a fine book that deserved that, and that created some interest in all these commercial. I say commercial publishers in particular because previously what used to happen is academies used to translate this, and it used to go to libraries and never was available in bookstores. A common man never got to read this. There were lots of novels which have been. It was more for academic. It was available in libraries. They used to distribute to different like institutions and that kind of stuff. So then this real thing about commercial publishing, getting hold, that agent reading your manuscript and pitching it to different publishers, all these things started. And everything it happens differently to different people. I just found an agent online, and just he was very dynamic. He is still like that, and he just I just sent the manuscript. He liked it and pitched it, and a couple of publishers did come in, and I just went with this. The literary scene is very vibrant, very diverse. You see lots of non-literary people writing in Kannada. There are architects, like engineers, physicians, writing their experiences, and they do have there are like wonderful literature coming out, and at the same time you see a whole bunch of literature based, rooted in grassroots level. From I can't say it's like it is representative of a completely different culture, meaning it's not urban, it is not the society, it's not the story of the ethos is completely different. It is like
yeah, you are right, and it's a new India. It's a different kind of India that English readers are being introduced to, and there is a transformation. There is a kind of a revolution that is going on in terms of people's the kind of sensibility that people are being introduced to. And so I'm glad that this is happening, because for a long time people like Salman Rushdie used to say that the best writing in India is the writing that is done in English.
Yeah.
But many people took exception to this because they said that you know nothing about Indian writing, Indian literature, because there's all kinds of wonderful writers in the regional languages who simply don't have a voice in English. That's all. So I'm glad that that problem is being addressed now, and so the rest of the world is beginning to see the greatness of the writing in the regional languages of India, the richness of it. And so your book is one such example. And so unfortunately, we are running out of time. And therefore, there are so many things that we could talk about, but maybe another time. And I want to thank you very much for your getting up so early in Minnesota and, coming to speak with us. And also, I want to thank Preeti Ars for organizing this, and to the Indo-American Arts Council for providing a forum where these new kinds of writing can be showcased. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of IAAC, I want to thank Dr. Kaginele and Professor Sridhar for an insightful and interesting conversation. I have to say, on a personal note, I was so heartened to hear how the resurgence of a regional language in particular has been given a voice again and a greater audience. It resonates with me. And the other thing that I really loved was how libraries played an important role in your lives, because it played an extremely important role in my life, circulating libraries. And the New York Public Library was my solace when I first came to New York. That was the place I would go to because there was nowhere else I could go. I couldn't work. I had to wait for my papers. So I would spend hours on end in the library and discover new writers, new books from all over the world. So I'm such a believer in libraries, and I appreciate what a role it's played in our lives. This book, Hijab, sounds so fascinating and really something that I want to read. And I'm sure our viewers would like to do that too. It can be purchased on Amazon, and it's also downloadable on many platforms. So I would recommend that you go out and get this book. And please, audience, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to you joining us in the next program. We have many more. Please look us up on IAAC.com and you will be able to see what we have for you next. Thank you all. Take care.